So now I'm going to talk about or welcome Jackson, Jackson Sasine. He is the manager, conservation manager of Pardamat Conservation Area, a community-based conservancy in Kenya, which is dedicated to balancing wildlife conservation, sustainable livestock production, and the livelihoods of Maasai landowners. He has led initiatives that support human-wildlife coexistence, protect critical wildlife corridors, reduce human-wildlife conflict, and support landscape restoration. Jackson will be focusing on the invasive plant challenges in the Pardamat Conservancy, with particular reference to the two dominant species that are challenging the reserve, Opuntia stricta, the prickly pear, and Datura Stramonium, the common thorn apple. Jackson, you're absolutely welcome. Over to you.
Pardamat Conservation Area was established in 2016 and has a total acreage of 64,000 acres, owned by 850 landowners. Of course, we are organized as a trust with a company limited by shares for management purposes. And we have a team of 21 rangers plus 7 more staff that are supporting the team from the office. In the context of the Maasai Mara landscape, Pardamat is that beige guy or polygon sitting right in the middle of the conservancies, connecting the southern conservancies to the northern. And of course, you have the light green area being the Maasai Mara National Reserve, and these jungle green areas are the conservancies, Pardamat included, different in color for 2 reasons, so that you can be able to identify where we are or where we are talking about. But also, it's a conservation area. It's very unique because among all these conservancies, you have Pardamat as the only area that has a triple use model, where you have people living on with their livestock, and of course with a lot of wildlife in it. So it's quite a very interesting conservation model, first to be pioneered in the landscape and perhaps leading also in the country. And it's becoming quite a successful model, which everybody else is emulating or benchmarking from. If you look at our map, there's a line. I don't know whether you see my cursor, just beyond Pardamat, which is the primary boundaries of what the Mara ecosystem should be. And most of all these other areas are settled, and therefore people, we can only secure this area based on a Pardamat model. So therefore the success of this conservation area really means a lot to the success of these other areas that we envision to secure. We used to have 2 migrations in the landscape. One eastern migration, this brown zone is the lost loiter migration, which is the eastern migration of the Mara, then the southern migration from Serengeti. And because of the land subdivision and privatization, we've lost this particular breeding zone of the Mara landscape, which is unfortunate. And what Pardamat aspires to achieve is to open more space to try and restore this lost migration or habitat for our wildebeest. And this is the model. This is how it looks like. When you come to Pardamat, this is what you see. You'll find this kind of picture. It's also community-led. So because of this kind of interaction, the conservancy, the community themselves led the effort of establishing this conservancy because they thought they had set aside land for wildlife in other conservancies, but still there's a lot of wildlife here, and therefore they resulted into a conservation area that looks like what you see in this picture. These are photos from Pardamat Conservation Area. That kind of interaction has a lot of challenges, and some of them is what you see here. This is wildlife, killed by fences. They're hanging the fence lines. And so it's been really a very big, this fencing has been a very big ecological disaster. So because of the fact that landowners of this conservancy has land in need of in other conservancies, they thought they could fence off their land for the livestock and their families alone. But the area has proven to be very critical for our wildlife, especially because it is rich in natural resources, talk of water, salt lakes, and good vegetation, and so on. So that's the reason why you find these animals dying on the fences because they try to find their way in, into habitats and also access to the natural resource that I talk about. This is all the other price that the community pay. Of course, it's both disastrous for wildlife, but also very expensive for the landowners. Hosting this wildlife caused this kind of challenges where you find livestock predation is a big issue. Even bad interactions between elephants and human, where you have people losing their life or kids even not going to school because there is an elephant on the road or on their path to school. So there is a lot of challenges associated to staying with this wildlife. Some of the solutions we are trying to employ is actually opening up land so that we can reduce the risks of animals being killed by fences, but also corridors being blocked, thus leading to human-wildlife conflict. So far, 437 kilometers of fence line has been pulled down to open these corridors connecting us to habitats and other conservancies adjacent to Pardamat Conservation Area. And of course, to address the issue of predation, we provide these predator-proof bombers. More than 100, 100 of them has been provided to landowners who suffered from predation, especially net predation, and therefore, which are actually proving to be very effective and helping us reduce the night predation significantly. Those are a few interventions among very many others because I'm just trying to put you into perspective to understand the Pardamat Conservation Area, the location, and the kind of interaction that we are having, both negative and positive. Because on the positive side, of course, landowners are earning from this conservation. Then we dive into the topic of the day. Um, Sorry. Some of the species that we see, we have this Opuntia, which is commonly known as Eve's needle, which is used by people to fence. That is how it's been propagated. People are using it also to control gully erosion, and that's how it's getting its way into the ecosystem, and that's how it's spreading across the landscape. And you'll find it mostly in homesteads. You'll find it on the roadsides, and of course, in some other areas within the conservation area. So that is the reason for its spread. It's been introduced as a fencing material. The other one is Datura. Datura likes disturbed soil, especially along the roads. You'll also find it in abandoned homes or areas that were settled before and people relocated. So anywhere that has had soil disturbance, you'll find the Datura in those areas. It's quite dangerous because we have this plant called managu. It's black nightshade. It's a very nutritious vegetable and is a young seedling. they quite look alike with the black nightshade. And most of the people will mistake it, and it's quite poisonous. So it has also an effect to human life. Uh, Also, I mentioned about it being very common in disturbed soil. Uh, not in, not this is not this is Camphorbush tacanadus. It is not uh, exotic. It's actually a native plant, but very interesting. Together with this orange leaf croton, they are really taking the rangelands. And we realized that we are losing a lot of grasslands because of the two species and affecting the grazing patterns, also affecting the movement of wildlife within the conservation area, because you'll find areas that had a lot of grass that you would do livestock grazing. You could have the anklets or grazers on being thickets with no grass, and therefore it's really becoming a very interesting species, though it's not invasive, it's not exotic, but it's almost becoming an ecological disaster because we really are seeing a lot of ecological changes because of these two species. So those are the other two species that we have that we think they are not as good. And I think I've realized over time that when you find areas that are degraded in terms of overgrazed, you'll find the camphor bush and the croton taking over. So I know it's both caused by the lack of proper rangeland management, but also it is, when it is dry and there's no grass in the rangelands, it's spreading like fire in the area and covering much of it. I've even seen some plant species also disappearing within the areas that these two, and especially where the cotton is thick or highly dense, disappearing. Like what do you call this? What we call like aloe vera, it's no more, and some several other species of plants that we don't see anymore because of this croton and these other camphor bush. In some of the interventions, we only are employing mechanical measures, just to uproot, especially the Datura. Sometimes we do control the croton by, cutting bushes when it's becoming too much. But it's quite I can say, out of hand. We cannot control the croton at the moment. It's really taking over quite on a very high rate. And we also have a challenge of lack of manpower to do the control of Datura within the conservation area. We've not had any intervention as far as the Opuntia is concerned. It's not yet a big threat, but it's, if not addressed at the moment, it's gonna take over the rangelands also quite rapidly. So that's my little pitch or presentation for the invasive species that we have within the conservation area. Asante sana.
Thank you, Jackson. I feel like I've actually traveled physically into Pardamat, and I really, thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I really experienced the threats and the challenges that you have. I was actually going to ask you a very quick question, which is WTC, the Wildlife Tourism College. We have a whole lot of the students in the audience today. And I was wondering whether you knew what are the key species around the college, the invasive species around the college. Do you know which ones they're struggling with?
The college sits right in the heart of Pardamat, so whatever species we are encountering in Pardamat are the same they also see, which is Opuntia and that Datura Stramonium. And of course, croton is all over the place. It's a subject of discussion. It's not I don't qualify it as an invasive species, but it's an observation that I've made that it's taking over the rangelands and that we are losing our grazing spaces because of this croton and the camphor bush.
Okay, so I welcome our subsequent speakers to also think about croton. It would be interesting to get their insights into the management of croton. Kani, I see that you have your hand up.
Thank you very much. I am Kani Lukaria from Wildlife Research and Training Institute. I would just like to give a compliment on the presentation on invasive species because we have been dealing with invasive species in protected areas in Mount Kenya National Park, Aberdare, and the conservancies in the Laikipia, what we call the Mountain Conservation Area. And in fact, I would like to give a compliment on the issues of climate change, whereby the climate change is changing the meeting point of species, where we have the ecotypes at the ecotone areas, whereby there is deflection of species from the lower regions to the upper regions. And therefore, in this case, now it has not been able to, the resilience of species and also the grasses. Also, another thing that I would like to put across is successions. Because some of the species that we have within the rangelands have had no succession, so that or they are changing too quickly, such that they are being overcome by the so-called invasive species, despite the fact that they are either native or exotic. The other thing is degradation. Some of the species that we are seeing in most of our protected areas, that they are becoming too many within the protected area, is because of the suitability and availability to the animals. Some of the species are very much available, but they are not suitable. So you'll just find out that most of the suitable species to plant species will be browsed on too much, such that the other species that is not suitable, though available, will just be too much within an ecosystem. The other thing is the control and the sustainability of the control that we have within the ecosystems. You'll find out that, like the Datura Stramonium, people will start controlling it after seeding. When it is seeds, it produces so many seeds. Instead of having a sustainable way of removing the seedlings when before they flower or seed. The other thing is that some of the species that we have around are just indicators of something, either succession, sustainability, or they are showing us that there is a degradation. So within the system, the ecosystems that we have, we need to look at maybe the biomass assessment, so that at least we can tell which species is being browsed too much or is being fed on by the animals. And in this case, when we know, then we can be able either to replenish the reserves or the seed reserves of the grassy species that we have, so that we can bring down the successions, or we can bring down the ability of degradation, maybe by changing of the ability of a seed or a seedling to withstand the changes in climate change. That is what I have to say on the compliments on the sustainability of control of the species. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kani. There's a question in the chat, which is, given that these plants like croton are indigenous but cause similar ecological damage. Should we classify and manage native woody encroachment as an invasive species, or does that definition belong strictly to non-native plants?
For me, there are two things here. These species, like the croton and the camphor bush, are not palatable. So you don't have a lot of predators on it. There's no wildlife, no livestock feeding on them, and therefore they thrive quite well. Because looking at the areas where you find these species, you have species like the Acacia brasilica and Sansevieria. They are completely gone because they are very good food for elephants. And I think I can also attribute the heavy presence of elephants in the ecosystem. Yeah, from my opinion, and as a practitioner in the field, I feel the croton is real, and that camphor bush, they are really becoming invasive because they are taking over quite a significant chunk of grazing areas.
Yes, yeah, in South Africa, we've got, sure, Benedict can also, we've got regulations specifically for bush encroachers, and it's regulation 15 and 16 of Conservation of Agricultural Resources. So it's managing the statutory requirements. There's various listed species. They're all indigenous. They're definitely invasive. So they're called like that in the legislation. But I'm not sure in Kenya, the same legislatory framework applies, but in South Africa, it's definitely there's listed bush encroachment species, acacia, whatever the new name is. Well, I can't pronounce that, but yeah, they're all listed there and in regulation.
There's a comment from Johan saying it's a very interesting comment that Jackson on the interaction between elephants and other ecosystem players and invasive plants. It surely complicates things. Jackson, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, my point on that was that I feel elephants as the ecosystem engineers sometimes, cultivate these plants by removing other plant species that could also help suppress them. Like I mentioned about the Acacia pacifica and Sansevieria, there were plants that were very common in areas that you see a lot of croton today, and they sort of vanished or disappeared. So, and the other, and of course, being the fact that they don't feed on these, they don't break, while they are breaking every single acacia they find in the field, while they're breaking all the plants, other plants like the acacias and other edible the plants that they eat, they don't at all touch the camphor bush and also the croton. So that's where the complication is. Because if these ecosystem engineers are helping us also to try and control, it will have been something different. But they are not working at all we don't have any biological mechanisms to control these, or natural mechanisms. Not like the acacia where you find sometimes the elephants flooding them all and you have new shoots coming up.
Jackson, thank you so much again. It's been really valuable. You've really set the scene for us as we continue into the workshop. And I'm hoping that you're going to get a lot of support and answers from this workshop. And yeah, I feel like you're experts in it you're an expert in it as well. So thank you for all your sharing.